Welcome to this NotebookLM explainer, built entirely from your uploaded sources for Graphic Design Lecture 8. Today, we're diving straight into a complete business branding project from start to finish. We're going to walk step by step through a real professional workflow, taking those raw foundational ideas and transforming them into a totally cohesive, market-ready brand identity. Let's get right into it.
Here's our roadmap for today. We're covering strategy and brand archetypes, visual identity and logos, print and stationery design, digital and social graphics, and finally, how to pull the whole shebang together for the final client presentation.
Now, just a quick note before we jump in. Because we are strictly focusing only on the uploaded sources for this explainer, we won't be covering things like 3D mockups and broader physical marketing materials, simply because they are missing from today's files. But don't worry, we still have a massive amount of actionable technical ground to cover.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, Strategy and Brand Archetypes. To build a brand that actually connects emotionally, rather than just, sitting flat on a page, you really have to follow this 4-step brand attitude process. Because let's face it, business relationships are fundamentally transactional. But the brands that tap into the why behind an audience's choices, those are the ones that win. So step 1, you need to deeply understand your audience's core desires. Step 2, identify a personality position that actively meets that desire. Step 3, adopt the right mix of archetypes. And finally, step 4, give your brand a real, tangible outlook and actual opinions on the world.
The brand archetype wheel is basically your master framework for executing this strategy. Think of it like a psychological blueprint. You take a specific customer desire and match it to the archetype that evokes that exact feeling. Say your audience is desperately craving freedom. Well, your brand might adopt the explorer archetype at its core. Or if they just want to belong, the everyman archetype is going to give them that warm feeling of connection. It's all about perfectly aligning human psychology with brand personality.
Now, here is the golden rule when you're mixing these up. Your core archetype absolutely needs to make up a minimum of 70% of your overall brand personality. That leaves you with a 30% buffer for differentiation. If you try mixing in too many archetypal characteristics, or if you let that core drop below 70%, you're going to end up with a diluted, confused brand that honestly doesn't resonate with anybody. Keep it focused.
Okay, moving right along to Section 2, Visual Identity and Logos.
A massive mistake novice designers make is just designing one single logo and calling it a day. No way! To give a brand ultimate flexibility, you actually need these 4 specific variations. First up, your primary logo. This is your most detailed front and center representation. Next, a secondary logo, which is usually a different arrangement, like stacking the text if the primary one is horizontal. Then you need a submark, which is your highly adaptable, simplified symbol. And finally, the favicon, that tiny little icon you see up in web browser tabs. Having all 4 of these ensures your brand stays completely cohesive, literally no matter where it lives.
And when it comes to actually building out these visual identities, modern workflows are evolving so fast. Generative AI has emerged as an incredible efficiency booster. In fact, nearly 90% of marketers are already using generative AI tools to elevate their creative output. It's not about replacing you as the designer, it's just a creative sidekick. It accelerates all those tedious tasks so you can actually focus your energy on the core strategy and the big aesthetic choices.
Let's transition into the physical world with Section 3, Print and Stationery Design. Look, print requires absolute, undeniable precision. For visiting cards or business cards, there are exact industry standards you just have to follow. The most crucial specs here are your boundaries. You must build in a bleed area of 0.125 inches to make sure your colors go all the way to the edge when they're cut. Your crop marks sit at 0.0625 inches, and your safety margin for any critical text, keep that at 0.125 inches. Memorize these specs, because mastering them guarantees a flawless, professional print run every single time.
Switching gears from print to pixels, here is Section 4, Digital and Social Graphics.
You can basically consider this your universal rule book for social media sizes. And remember, aspect ratio matters way more than just raw pixel counts. You've got your 1:1 square for classic feeds, the 9:16 full vertical for things like stories and TikTok, and the 16:9 landscape for YouTube. But I really want you to notice the 4:5 vertical ratio at 1080 by 1350 pixels. This is an absolute game changer. It is your best bet for maximizing reach because it takes up the maximum amount of screen real estate on mobile feeds across Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. But no matter which platform you're designing for, you have to strictly adhere to safe zone rules. Always leave 100 to 150 pixel padding on all sides for your vertical content. And most importantly, seriously, do not forget this, never place critical text in the lower 20% of stories or reels. That is exactly where the app's captions and UI buttons live. There's literally nothing worse than spending hours executing a beautiful design only to have it completely covered up by a TikTok caption.
Transitioning over to website graphics, specifically those massive full-screen background hero images, choosing the right file format is completely make or break. You need high resolution, sure, but if the file is too huge, it's going to kill your loading speeds and ruin the user experience. Avive offers maximum compression with the highest visual quality, though browser support can be a bit spotty. WebP is generally your absolute best bet for hero images. It's about 26% smaller than PNGs and JPEGs at the exact same quality. Save your JPEGs for complex photographs and only use PNGs when you absolutely positively need a transparent background, because they will always create the largest file sizes.
And speaking of website hero images, you just cannot rely on a one-size-fits-all approach anymore. Think about it. Nearly 60% of all global website traffic happens on mobile devices now. Your hero image isn't really a desktop experience first anymore. You absolutely must design responsively. So scale your desktop designs to a 16:9 aspect ratio. That's roughly 1600 by 500 pixels. But for mobile, you have to pivot to a 2:3 aspect ratio, roughly 800 by 1200 pixels, so that your main image, text, and call to action stay perfectly centered and completely visible.
All right, bringing it all home with Section 5, Final Client Presentation.
We've strategized the psychology, designed the logos, prepped the print, and optimized for digital. Now, how do we actually build the client's confidence in all this work? Well, the first half of your presentation document shouldn't even be about design at all. It needs to clearly communicate the narrative and the business purpose behind the brand. Start by reminding the client of their value propositions, their brand story, the mission and vision statements, and their core values. By doing this, you're proving right out of the gate that the designs you're about to show them are deeply rooted in their actual business strategy.
Next, you introduce the visual identity. Show them the logo placements on a bunch of varied color backgrounds so they can instantly see its versatility. Then, lay out the primary, secondary, and accent color palettes. Now here is a vital professional touch. Always provide the exact color codes for every scenario. Give them the hex codes for web design, the CMY codes for physical printing, and the RGB codes for digital displays. This is what guarantees your client can maintain perfect consistency long after your job is done.
Finally, establish the visual hierarchy for them. Detail the exact typography families and lay out strict rules on how to combine them. Explicitly specifying which font goes in the header, which is for the subheader, and what to use for body text. Then, pair all of that with a clear definition of the overall brand tone. Is it casual, formal, authoritative? Doing this ensures that every single brand touchpoint in their ecosystem is perfectly aligned with that psychological archetype we nailed down back in Step 1.
And that wraps up our explainer for Lecture 8. We've covered everything from psychological archetypes all the way down to CMYK color codes and safe zone padding. Remember, the true power of graphic design isn't just making things look pretty, it's about executing a cohesive, strategic system across every possible medium. So, how are you going to apply this step-by-step workflow to elevate your very next client project? Take these formulas, take these strategies, and go create something totally unforgettable. Thanks for joining me today, and keep designing with purpose.